The pale moon hung low, casting a sickly pallor over Valder's keep. Inside the Alpha's bedchamber, Seren stood rigid by the window, her gaze fixed on the sleeping man who was supposed to be her destined mate. 3 weeks of marriage. 3 weeks of a suffocating, glacial silence. 3 weeks of clinging to the pathetic hope that something, anything, might change. Tonight, it finally did, and it shattered her. Driven by a restless ache, she had sought him out, only to find him secluded in his study with Nerissa, his venomous senior advisor. The muffled sound of their laughter bleeding through the cracked door made her freeze. The poisonous words that followed would claw at her soul for the rest of her days. "You think I wanted her?" Calder's voice was callous. "She was the price of peace, nothing more." "And the mating bond?" Nerissa pressed, her tone dripping with wicked, probing amusement. A suffocating pause. Then came his executioner's blow, flat and painfully final. "It means nothing. She means nothing." Now, Seren stood engulfed in the dark, that mocking laughter still ripping through her mind. Yet, her hands were eerily steady as she stripped herself of it all. She took absolutely nothing. Not the suffocating silk gowns she never desired. Not the heavy jewels that felt like humiliating shackles. She took not a single artifact from this prison that was never her home. The agonizing truth was inescapable. She was merely the sacrificial daughter of a conquered pack, bartered like cattle to end a bloodbath. She was never meant to be loved. With that devastating clarity, she slipped past the oblivious guards who never fathomed the Alpha's wife would dare to flee and walked through the iron gates that offered no sanctuary. She surrendered herself to the pitch-black forest, letting it swallow her whole. By dawn, she was gone. By dawn, Alpha Calder of Valdris would wake to freezing sheets, an agonizing, hollow silence, and the haunting question that would torment him. Why had she vanished without a single trace? 3 weeks earlier, Seren had stood at the altar swathed in a gown the color of morning snow, swallowing her pride and telling herself this was the price of survival. The brutal war between Valdris and Ashford had ravaged their lands for 4 bloody years. 4 years of slaughter, of burning villages, of watching her father's once mighty pack wither into a broken shadow. The terms of surrender had been brutally absolute. The victorious Alpha of Valdris would claim the defeated Alpha's daughter as his mate. Peace would be forged in their union. No one had bothered to ask Seren for her consent. She had laid eyes on Calder exactly once before the ceremony. He had stood at the far end of her father's ruined hall, a towering menace, taller and broader than any wolf she had ever encountered. His sheer presence pressed against her chest like a suffocating weight. With hair as dark as a raven's wing and eyes like bottomless abysses, his face was a stoic mask, one that looked as though it had forgotten how to smile in childhood and never cared to relearn. He had assessed her the way a ruthless merchant inspects a legal document, evaluated, noted, and filed away. Seren had stared back, wielding every last scrap of her battered dignity. That was 3 agonizing weeks ago. Now, she drifted through Valder's keep like a transparent ghost, haunting her own life. The enemy wolves watched her with undisguised hostility and suspicion. The servants responded to her with clipped, hollow politeness. She ate in isolation. She slept in isolation. Even when Calder physically occupied the bed beside her, a towering fortress of rigid silence stood between them. He refused to touch her. She had repeatedly lied to herself, claiming she was grateful for his absolute indifference. But tonight, sleep had completely abandoned her. The keep was unnervingly quiet, freezing to the bone, and her inner wolf clawed fiercely beneath her skin, driven by a nameless, desperate restlessness. Wrapping a thin robe around herself, she ventured out to find her mate. It wasn't out of desire. It was a desperate need to understand why their mating bond felt so wrong, like a frayed thread, agonizingly fragile, and stretched to its breaking point. She tracked him to his study. The heavy wooden door was left ajar, bleeding a slash of golden light into the bleak corridor. She raised her hand to knock, but the sound of voices stopped her cold. Then, the laughter. His laughter. Seren froze, paralyzed. In 21 days, she had never once heard Calder laugh. The sound was low, fleeting, and startlingly warm, striking her chest with the physical force of shattering glass. Then came the second voice. Female. Nerissa. His senior advisor, a woman with dangerously sharp features and even sharper, predatory eyes, who had watched Seren with thinly veiled disgust since the moment she arrived. "You cannot be serious." Nerissa's tone was dripping with mock intimacy, a teasing lilt that made Seren's stomach violently clench. The girl follows you around like a lost, pathetic pup begging for scraps. It is almost pitiful to watch. "Leave it," Calder's voice snapped, flat and uncompromising. "Oh, come now." The soft rustle of expensive fabric echoed as Nerissa moved closer to him. "We both know exactly why she is here. The council demanded a symbol of unity. So, you took one. But you cannot possibly tell me you actually desire her." A suffocating silence stretched. Seren forgot how to breathe. "You think I wanted her?" Calder finally spoke, each word a fatal blow. "She was the price of peace, nothing more." Something vital cracked violently behind Seren's ribs. A small, sharp, and entirely irreparable fracture. "And the mating bond," Nerissa pressed, refusing to relent. "Surely even you feel something for her." Another pause. Longer, heavier, deadlier. "It means nothing." His voice was coated in ice. "She means nothing." Nerissa let out a soft, immensely satisfied laugh, a sound that scraped mercilessly across Seren's flesh like barbed wire. Trembling violently, Seren backed away from the cracked door. Her hands shook. Her core shook. 3 weeks of agonizing silence. 3 weeks of desperate trying. 3 weeks of foolishly praying that, eventually, he might look at her and see a living, breathing soul rather than a cheap political transaction. She was the price of peace, nothing more. Seren pivoted and walked back to the icy bedchamber. She did not break into a run. She moved with the horrifyingly careful precision of a woman carrying a chest full of shattered glass, acutely aware that one wrong breath would cause her to violently hemorrhage. She packed nothing. She penned no tragic farewells. She simply turned her back on it all, striding out the door, down the echoing corridors, and past the incompetent guards who didn't dare question the Alpha's wife. She threw herself into the untamed forest, a wilderness that had always offered more comfort than any hostile stone hall ever could. In 3 hours, the sun would rise. By then, Seren of Ashford would be completely erased from their world. Calder jerked awake, his hand instinctively reaching for a warmth that simply wasn't there. His fingers met freezing sheets and hollow space. The faint indent where her body should have rested was already vanishing. He bolted upright, his dark eyes frantically scanning the room. The heavy wardrobe doors were shut. Her robe hung limply on its hook. Her delicate shoes sat perfectly aligned by the door. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Everything except her. "Seren?" A suffocating silence was his only answer. Calder surged to his feet, his inner wolf immediately pacing and snarling beneath his skin. He tore through the bathing chamber. Empty. The sitting room. Empty. He strode barefoot into the freezing corridor, a sickening dread pooling heavily in his gut. "You!" He seized a passing servant by the arm, his grip ruthless. "The Luna. Where is she?" The young woman's face drained of color. I have not seen her, Alpha. Not since last evening." Calder shoved past her, his pace accelerating into a frantic sprint, taking the stone stairs 2 at a time. The great hall was desolate. The kitchens held only bleary-eyed staff preparing the morning meal. No one had seen her. No one had witnessed her departure. He finally cornered Bren, his captain of the guard, in the eastern corridor. "The gates!" Calder roared, his voice echoing off the stone. "Who passed through them last night?" Bren frowned in confusion. "No one of note, Alpha. A few servants returning from the village. A merchant's cart at dusk." He hesitated, dread dawning in his eyes. "And the Luna." Calder's entire body turned to stone. "What?" Shortly after the 3rd bell, she walked through the main gates alone. I assumed she was simply taking air in the gardens. She has done so before in the early hours, and no one thought to follow her. Bren's frown deepened defensively. "She is the Luna, Alpha. She is permitted to walk freely within the grounds." "She did not stay within the grounds." Calder's voice tore from his throat, scraped and raw. "She is gone." The following hour dissolved into absolute, controlled chaos. Frantic search parties were dispatched. Trackers were hurled toward the borders. Every servant was ruthlessly questioned, every guard harshly interrogated, and every inch of the massive keep was violently turned inside out. Nothing. Seren had vanished like morning mist. Calder stood frozen in their bedchamber, lungs burning as he inhaled the faint, lingering scent of her wildflowers, intertwined with something impossibly clean. He desperately tried to comprehend the madness. She had stripped herself of everything. No clothes, no coin, not even the small wooden box she kept on her vanity, the sole relic she had salvaged from Ashford. She had walked out into the lethal forest, wearing nothing but the clothes on her back. Why? He obsessively replayed the excruciating weeks of their marriage, the suffocating silence. Yes, he had maintained a glacial distance because he was terrified, completely ignorant of how to be anything else. But she had seemed to accept it, resigned, perhaps. Never joyful, but never openly furious either. What had triggered this? His frantic gaze locked onto the desk. Her hairbrush sat abandoned, a few strands of dark silk still caught in the bristles. Beside it sat a pathetic little vase of dried flowers she had painstakingly gathered from the South Gardens, and a battered book of Ashford poetry, its spine cracked from relentless rereading. She had been trying. She had been desperately trying to carve a home out of this hostile prison. A suffocating tightness gripped Calder's chest. A heavy knock shattered the silence. Bren strode in, his face grim and pale. "We found her trail, Alpha." She headed straight north into the Thornwood, but the scent completely fades after 2 miles. She deliberately hid her tracks. Of course she did. She was an Ashford wolf. Her ancestors had mastered the art of vanishing in forests far deadlier than this. There is something else. Bren hesitated, swallowing hard. "One of the kitchen girls. She confessed she saw the Luna hovering near your study last night, shortly after the second bell." Calder stopped breathing. The second bell. At that exact hour last night, he had been locked in his study with Nerissa, furiously reviewing border reports and the brewing unrest in the east. And Nerissa had deliberately, relentlessly probed about his mate. The fragments of that cursed conversation slammed into him like physical blows. Nerissa's mocking interrogations. His own explosive irritation at the intrusion. The toxic, defensive venom he had spewed just to force her to shut her mouth. "You think I wanted her?" She was the price of peace, nothing more. He had merely been regurgitating the council's own sterile political garbage back at Nerissa, hurling their vile logic in her face to prove he didn't need to justify his actions to anyone. But Seren. God, if Seren had been standing outside that cracked door. If she had only heard those brutal, out-of-context fragments. The mating bond. It means nothing. He had meant that the hollow political arrangement meant nothing compared to the profound depths a true, organic bond could reach. He had meant he refused to reduce her to a mere symbol. But if she had only heard the poison, Calder's blood turned to absolute ice. She believed he loathed her. She believed she was entirely worthless to him. "Alpha?" Bren watched him with mounting alarm. "What are your orders?" Calder was already surging toward the door, a man possessed. "Saddle my horse. Send immediate word to the Northern Watch. I am hunting her down myself. The council can rot. Alpha, she is an Ashford wolf. She knows those wildlands intimately. If she does not wish to be found, then I will tear the forest apart until I find her anyway," Calder roared. Calder paused at the threshold, a razor-sharp, desperate agony clawing at his insides. He had wasted 3 weeks barricading himself behind icy indifference because he had zero comprehension of how to be the mate she desperately deserved. Because he had been forged in bloodshed and never taught softness. Because he was utterly terrified of crushing something so precious, and in his cowardice to protect himself, he had completely shattered her instead. "Bren." Calder's voice dropped to a lethal, deadly quiet. "Who specifically ordered the kitchen girl to spy on my study door?" Bren blinked, completely derailed. I do not understand." "Neither do I. Not yet." Calder's jaw locked in a murderous tick. "But someone deliberately orchestrated for my wife to hear that exact conversation, and I will gut whoever is responsible." He stormed out into the biting dawn, his inner wolf howling in pure, unadulterated anguish. Somewhere deep in the unforgiving Thornwood, Seren was freezing, alone and bleeding from the belief that she was nothing. He would find her, and he would spend every breathing second of the rest of his life proving how devastatingly wrong she was. Seren had been pushing her broken body for 6 grueling hours when she stumbled upon the child. She had breached the northern borders of Valdres territory long before the sun dared to rise, her inner wolf seamlessly navigating the oppressive, familiar darkness of the Thornwood. This savage terrain didn't belong to Calder. It answered to no one. It was a lawless expanse between sovereign borders where the desperate, the damned, and the forgotten clawed out a miserable existence. Seren knew these woods intimately. Not this precise stretch, but ones identical to it. During the horrific 4-year war, her pack had been forced to retreat into these exact shadows, cowering in the bloody gaps between battlefields, mastering the art of vanishing. She was exceptionally good at disappearing. By mid-morning, the hem of her borrowed robe was shredded to ribbons, and her bare feet screamed in agony, yet she refused to stop. She had no destination. Returning home was a laughable impossibility. Her own father had sold her off to seal a treaty. Ashford would spit her out. She was packless. She had absolutely nothing. That devastating realization should have driven her to her knees, but a bizarre, hollow numbness had anchored itself in her chest during the long, agonizing march. The worst had already come to pass. She had surrendered her body and soul to a monster who viewed her as less than dirt. She had been pathetically naive to believe their mating bond might blossom into something real. It wouldn't. It never would. So, she kept putting one bleeding foot in front of the other, breathing through the numbness, trying to fathom a future out of nothing. That was when the agonizing cries pierced the silence. Seren froze instantly. The sound was faint, muffled by the dense foliage, echoing from somewhere to her left. The heartbreaking, rhythmic sobs of a child. Her inner wolf surged to the surface, its ferocious protective instincts instantly obliterating her profound exhaustion. She tore through the vicious underbrush, fighting the thorns until she stood at the lip of a steep, treacherous ravine. Curled at the bottom, pressed desperately against a rotting log, was a little girl. She was impossibly small, perhaps 6 or 7. Her clothes were filthy, shredded rags, her raven hair a matted mess of twigs and leaves. She was clutching a dirty bundle of cloth to her chest, as if her life depended on it, her tiny frame convulsing with the sheer violence of her weeping. Seren recklessly scrambled down the steep embankment, loose stones and dirt cascading beneath her bleeding feet. The little girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide, wild, and utterly terrified. For a split second, she looked ready to bolt like a hunted rabbit. Easy. Seren immediately threw her hands up, freezing a few feet away. I am not going to hurt you. The child just stared at her, thick tracks of tears carving through the grime on her hollow cheeks. Her eyes were breathtakingly strange, one a deep brown, the other a striking green set like mismatched jewels in a face starved to the bone. Are you out here all alone? Seren asked, her voice trembling with gentle urgency. No response. Only that wide, hyper-vigilant stare. Seren slowly lowered herself into a crouch, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. My name is Seren. What is yours? A suffocating silence stretched. Then, so faintly Seren almost missed it. Ren. Seren forced a warm, careful smile. That is a beautiful name. Are you hurt anywhere, Ren? The little girl slowly shook her head, her tiny fingers digging deeper into her bundled cloth. Hungry, she whimpered. Seren's heart violently contracted. She had absolutely nothing to offer. No rations, no weapons. She had fled her gilded cage with nothing but the thin robe on her back. How long have you been hiding out here, sweet girl? Ren's bottom lip quivered pathetically. Mama told me to wait. She promised she would come back. Where is your mama now? The bad wolves. Ren's voice dropped to a terrified, breathy whisper. The bad wolves came. Mama told me to run. I ran, and I hid, and I waited. Her filthy little face completely crumpled in devastation. She didn't come back. Seren squeezed her eyes shut as a sharp, sympathetic agony lanced through her chest. She knew exactly what bad wolves meant. Ruthless rogues, savage raiders, the scum who preyed on vulnerable refugees in the lawless wildlands. This poor child's mother was almost certainly slaughtered. How long ago, little one? Seren asked, her voice thick with sorrow. How many nights? Ren held up 4 trembling fingers. 4 nights. 4 freezing, pitch-black nights alone in the lethal Thornwood, without food or a protector. It was a sheer miracle the child hadn't been torn apart. Ren, Seren inched closer, projecting every ounce of steady, maternal calm she could muster. I know you are terrified, but I am going to help you. Do you understand? You are not alone anymore. The girl scrutinized her with those striking, mismatched eyes, assessing Seren with a tragic maturity that had no business being on a child's face. You are sad, Ren observed in a quiet, haunting voice. Seren blinked, completely taken aback. What? Your eyes. Ren pointed a dirty finger at her own face. They look exactly like Mama's did, after Papa went away. She paused, the innocence of her next question hitting like a physical blow. Did someone leave you too? The innocent observation gutted her. Seren swallowed the massive lump in her throat, fighting fiercely to keep her expression perfectly neutral. Something like that, she finally choked out. Ren seemed to deeply consider this. Slowly, her rigid posture relaxed, her death grip on the bundle loosening a fraction. Mama used to say that sad people find each other in the dark, so they can be less sad together. Seren's throat seized completely. Your mama sounds like a very wise woman. She was. Ren's voice cracked. She was the wisest. Seren held out her hand, palm up. Come with me, Ren. We will find a safe place. We will find food. And then we will figure out what comes next. Together. For an agonizingly long moment, the child remained perfectly still. Then, inch by inch, she reached out and slipped her impossibly small, ice-cold fingers into Seren's hand. You smell like flowers, Ren murmured softly. Seren let out a breathless, wet huff of laughter. I suppose I do. And something else. Ren tilted her head, her little nose twitching as she caught a new scent. Like the big wolves? The scary ones with the gold eyes? Seren frowned, her blood running cold. What big wolves, Ren? The ones from the giant stone castle. Ren's grip on Seren's hand tightened into a vice. The ones who came hunting for someone. All the color rapidly drained from Seren's face. Hunting for someone? She repeated, her voice laced with dread. When? Just this morning. Ren pointed a shaking finger back in the exact direction Seren had fled from. I was hiding deep in the ravine. They kept screaming a name. Over and over again. Seren's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What name? Ren looked up with those haunting, two-toned eyes. Yours, she stated simply. They were screaming for Seren. Calder slammed into her scent 3 miles deep into the Thornwood, and it hit him like a brutal sledgehammer to the sternum. Wildflowers and something impossibly clean, now heavily polluted with the sour tang of exhaustion and raw terror. He had been tracking her for agonizing hours, his inner beast violently thrashing beneath his skin, every primal instinct screaming at him to shift and sprint until his lungs burst. But he forced himself to remain human, maintaining an ironclad grip on his control. If he suddenly descended upon her in his monstrous wolf form, wild-eyed, feral, and desperate, he would only push her further into terror. Her desperate trail carved relentlessly north, plunging deeper into the treacherous wildlands than any sane wolf would dare traverse alone. But she hadn't been running in a blind panic. Her path was meticulously calculated, intentionally weaving through vicious, dense underbrush designed to baffle amateur trackers, deliberately crossing running streams to obliterate her scent. She was actively fighting to remain utterly invisible. That devastating realization dropped like a lead weight in Calder's stomach. He charged forward, his elite scouts fanning out in a wide perimeter behind him. Bren had begged to join the hunt, but Calder had explicitly ordered his captain to remain at the keep. Someone absolutely had to keep a lethal eye on Nerissa. The mere thought of his senior advisor made his jaw lock in murderous rage. Something was profoundly, fundamentally wrong. He could feel the rot in his very bones. The convenient kitchen girl planted outside his study, the horribly calculated timing of Nerissa's venomous interrogations, the way she had relentlessly backed him into a corner until he snapped and spewed words he never meant. Nerissa had been a fixture of Valder's Keep since before Calder could walk. She had served his mother first, then seamlessly entrenched herself as an indispensable pillar of power after his father's death. She was a master of efficiency, lethally intelligent, and practically governed the territory. But lately, a toxic shift had occurred. Microscopic anomalies, the way she physically crowded him, the undisguised, acidic contempt she harbored for Seren, the sickeningly satisfied purr of her laugh when Calder had uttered those damning words. He violently rejected the thought of treason, but the evidence was screaming at him. Suddenly, the scent spiked. Calder broke into a dead run, his heart violently hammering against his ribs. She was right here. She was. He smashed through a thick wall of thorns and stopped dead. A treacherous, narrow ravine scarred the forest floor, and there, sitting at the bottom on a rotting log, was Seren. Her delicate robe was shredded and caked in filth. Her dark hair hung in tangled, wild curtains around her face. She looked hollowed out, pushed to the absolute brink of starvation and exhaustion, and yet so devastatingly beautiful that Calder literally forgot how to draw breath. But she wasn't alone. Curled fiercely against her side, its head resting securely in Seren's lap, was a child. A skeletal little girl with matted hair and rags that hung off her emaciated frame. The child was asleep, clutching a filthy bundle like a lifeline. Seren's head snapped up, her hollow eyes locked onto his across the deep ravine, and Calder was forced to watch her face cycle through sheer shock, raw terror, and finally, a crushing, pathetic resignation. "You found me." Her voice was a dead, empty void. "I will always find you." The words ripped out of his throat before he could swallow them, raw, desperate, and spectacularly inadequate. Seren flinched as if struck. "Why? I am nothing to you. You made that perfectly clear." Calder threw himself down the steep incline, boots skidding wildly over loose shale. The child shifted, but remained asleep. Up close, the horror was magnified. He saw exactly how skeletal the girl was, how unbearably fragile. "What you heard," Calder begged, his voice trembling, "was not what I meant. I heard enough. You heard words I spoke in sheer frustration to a woman who refused to stop scrutinizing my choices. You did not hear what came before. You did not hear the context." Seren let out a laugh that sounded like snapping bones. "Context. You explicitly said I was the price of peace, nothing more. What magical context erases that?" Calder froze a mere arm's length away, close enough to trace the bruised, dark circles dragging under her eyes, to see the dried rivers of tears cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. His inner wolf whimpered in pure agony at the sight. "I was aggressively repeating the council's own vile words back at Nerissa," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "She has been relentlessly pushing me for weeks, questioning why I refuse to treat you as a cheap political tool, demanding to know why I maintain my distance instead of simply claiming your body and being done with it." Seren's icy glare wavered. A tiny, fragile fracture of uncertainty crept into her features. "I keep my distance," Calder continued, tearing his own chest open, "because I have absolutely no idea how to be what you need. Because I was raised in blood and never taught softness. Because I was utterly terrified that if I reached for you, my cursed hands would only crush something I could never, ever repair." A crushing silence descended upon the ravine. The starving child stirred in Seren's lap, emitting a pathetic whimper. Seren's hand moved purely on maternal instinct, gently stroking the girl's matted hair to soothe her. "Who is she?" Calder asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Her name is Ren." Seren's voice immediately softened. "I found her abandoned in this ditch. She has been alone out here for 4 days. Her mother..." Seren swallowed hard. "Raiders, rogue wolves." The mother ordered her to run and hide. She sacrificed herself. She never came back. Calder's chest constricted violently. 4 days alone in the Thornwood. Surviving. Seren stared down at the sleeping orphan with a sudden, ferocious maternal fire in her eyes. "She is infinitely stronger than she looks. As are you." Seren's gaze whipped back to his. For a long, suffocating moment, neither dared to breathe. Then, with quiet devastation, she spoke. "I cannot go back to being a ghost, Calder. I refuse to return to that freezing stone keep and pretend I do not exist while your entire pack watches and waits for me to break. You were never invisible to me. Then why did you never speak a single word to me? Why did you never, not once in 3 miserable weeks, ask me who I am, what I desire, or if I was even remotely happy?" The vicious accusation drove like a burning blade between his ribs, because she was absolutely right. Calder had no defense. "I do not know how to do this," he confessed, his massive shoulders slumping in defeat. "I have commanded legions of killers. I have ended bloody wars. But I am completely ignorant of how to be a mate, a husband. I have no idea how to make a woman feel safe when I have spent my entire existence learning to be a lethal weapon." Seren scrutinized him. The furious inferno in her eyes slowly banked into something far more complex, more sorrowful. Then learn, she ordered, her voice ironclad. Ask the questions. Truly listen to the answers. Stop treating me like a sacrificial treaty and start treating me like a living, breathing human being. Calder closed the final gap between them, moving at a glacial pace, offering her every possible avenue to bolt. She stood her ground. Come back, he begged, his voice a desperate rasp. Both of you, give me the chance to be better. Seren looked down at little Ren, the child's filthy fingers still clutching a fistful of Seren's robe in a death grip, even in deep sleep. She has no one left in this world, Seren declared fiercely. I will not abandon her. I would never ask you to. A fragile, gossamer thread wove between them in the cold air. The first genuine spark of something that might, one day, resemble trust. Suddenly, Ren's mismatched eyes snapped open. She peered up at the towering Alpha, and her tiny, filthy face went unnervingly rigid. I know you, the child whispered. Calder frowned in confusion. We have never met, little one. Your picture. Ren slowly pushed herself upright. Her two-toned eyes locked onto his face with laser precision. Mama had a hidden picture of you. She said you were the giant wolf who owed her a life debt. The blood instantaneously vanished from Calder's face. What was your mother's name? He demanded, his voice suddenly trembling. Maren. Ren clutched her bundle to her chest. Her name was Maren. Calder's entire reality violently fractured. He knew that name. He knew it intimately. Because 3 agonizing years ago, during the most catastrophic, bloody massacre of the war, a rogue healer from Ashford had dragged his shredded, bleeding carcass from a burning battlefield. She had painstakingly stitched his fatal wounds closed, while enemy hunting parties scoured the woods for them both. She had literally pulled him from the jaws of death, and he had sworn a sacred oath on his life to protect her. Seren watched the color drain from her mate's face and realized, with a sickening jolt of certainty, that their world was about to violently detonate. You knew her mother. It wasn't a question. Calder couldn't speak. He stared at the orphan child with a look of absolute horror, suffocating guilt, and profound grief. 3 years ago, he finally choked out, his voice ravaged. The massacre at Thornfield. I was butchered, separated from my vanguard. There was a healer. He swallowed hard. Maren. She found my body in the wreckage. She should have left me to rot. I was the supreme enemy. Instead, she spent 3 grueling days dragging me back from the brink while my scouts frantically hunted for us. Ren's eyes widened to the size of saucers. Mama never, ever told me that story. She couldn't have. Calder shook his head in despair. She swore me to total secrecy. If her own pack discovered she had saved the Alpha of Valdris, it would have been high treason, Seren finished, her mind racing at warp speed. A healer from Ashford. Her own pack. She frantically dug through her memories for a woman named Marin, but the relentless war had obliterated so many families. You swore to protect her, Seren said slowly, the horrific pieces snapping together. But she is dead. Those raiders, they were not random. Calder's jaw locked with a sickening crunch. Marin discovered things. She tended my infected wounds for 3 straight days. I was highly feverish, delirious. I have no idea what secrets I babbled, but he stopped dead. His massive hands curled into lethal, bone-white fists. Someone powerful wanted her permanently silenced. The terrifying implication washed over Seren like a bucket of ice water. You think someone from Valdris sent a death squad? Calder's horrific silence was a deafening confirmation. Ren froze entirely, her little face turning the color of ash. The bad wolves, she whispered in terror. They were not just raiders. I do not know the whole truth yet. Calder dropped to one knee, bringing himself level with the trembling child. But I swear to you on my soul, I am going to find out. And whoever ordered this slaughter will bleed for what they did to your mother. I swear it. Something profound shifted in Ren's mismatched eyes. Not entirely trust, but the terror receded. Mama promised you would come, she whispered. She said if the worst ever happened, I had to hunt down the giant wolf with the gold eyes. She said you owed her a life. Calder flinched as if a blade had just pierced his heart. She was right. They pitched camp as the bloody sun sank behind the mountains. Calder immediately dispatched his elite trackers back to the keep with strict orders to prepare secure chambers and to breathe not a single word about the child to anyone. Seren did not miss the lethal, murderous flash in his eyes when he specifically mentioned Nerissa's name. The night grew bitterly cold. Calder built a roaring fire while Seren bundled Ren against a log, swaddling her in a heavy cloak abandoned by a scout. The child was dead on her feet but violently fighting sleep, her wide eyes tracking Calder's every single move with intense suspicion. "You do not like him," Seren noted softly. Ren evaluated the giant man across the fire. "I do not know him. Mama swore he was honorable, but she also warned me that the wolves from the stone castle could never, ever be trusted. Your mother was incredibly wise. She was." Ren's tiny voice finally broke, the brave facade crumbling. "I miss her." Seren hauled the little girl into her lap, letting Ren bury her tear-soaked face in her shoulder. "I know, baby. I know you do." Across the crackling flames, Calder sat paralyzed, staring into the inferno. The dancing firelight violently carved the shadows across his face, exposing the hollow, haunted exhaustion beneath his eyes. He looked completely shattered, fragile, in a way Seren had never witnessed. "You need to sleep," she urged gently. His haunted eyes met hers. "So do you." "I will, as soon as she goes under." Seren nodded down at Ren, whose jagged breathing was finally smoothing out. A heavy, pregnant silence stretched between the mates. It wasn't comfortable, but the toxic hostility had evaporated. It was something entirely new. "I should have hunted her down," Calder confessed, his voice barely a rasp. "Maren, after the treaties were signed, I should have ensured she was untouchable. You could not have known." "I should have known." His fists clamped agonizingly onto his knees. "I swore a sacred oath. I broke it. And now her innocent daughter is a starving orphan because I failed to honor my word." Seren stared at him through the fire. 3 weeks of a miserable, icy marriage, and this was the most devastatingly honest he had ever been. He wasn't bleeding this raw confession to beg for absolution. He was bleeding because the sheer weight of his guilt was crushing him alive. "You cannot rewrite the past," Seren said, her voice steady and piercing. "But you hold absolute power over what happens tomorrow." Calder looked up, and for the very first time, Seren felt his gaze truly pierce her soul. He wasn't looking at a treaty, he was looking at her. "Come back to Valdris," he pleaded. "Not as a hollow symbol, not as a sacrificial treaty bride. Come back and help me hunt down the monster who butchered Maren. Help me shield her daughter. Help me," he choked, his jaw trembling violently. "Help me become the man you deserve." Seren didn't immediately reply. She gazed down at little Ren, now deeply unconscious against her chest. This extraordinary, shattered child who had lost her entire universe, who had braved the lethal wilderness alone for 4 days, and who still fiercely clung to hope because her mother promised that some wolves honored their debts. "If I agree to return," Seren's voice was forged of steel, "everything changes. You will speak to me. You will include me in the ruling of this pack. You will permanently cease treating me like decorative furniture that happens to occupy your bed. I swear it, and the child remains with us. She will not be tossed to the servants or shipped off to some forgotten orphanage. She stays. She stays." Seren met his intense gaze through the fire, the flames reflecting in his dark eyes, shifting them to a molten gold. "Then, I will return with you." A profound, visible relief washed over Calder's battered face. It wasn't a smile, he was far too broken for that yet, but the agonizing, rigid tension that had possessed him since he found her in the ravine finally shattered. "Thank you," he whispered fervently. Seren remained silent. She wasn't ready to instantly forgive him. Not yet. But she was finally willing to give him the battleground to earn it, and for tonight, that would have to suffice. They survived the night in shifts, Calder standing guard, while Seren dozed with Ren securely in her arms. But shortly past midnight, Seren was jolted awake by the horrifying sound of labored, violently ragged breathing. Calder was on his feet, his broad back turned to the fire. His entire massive frame was locked in absolute rigidity, violent, bone-rattling tremors racking his body like shockwaves. "Calder?" He didn't respond. His head was thrown back, his giant hands clamped like vices onto the trunk of a tree. Even from a distance, Seren could see his lethal claws violently extending and retracting, tearing into the bark. His inner beast was viciously fighting to rip its way out of his flesh. She gently laid Ren down and cautiously approached. "Calder, what is happening to you?" "Stay back!" His roar was guttural, demonic, barely human. "Please, I cannot control it." His spine snapped backward in a horrific arch. A sickening sound tore from his throat, half feral snarl, half a scream of pure, unadulterated agony. The bones beneath his skin began to violently crack and violently realign. The transformation was hitting him entirely too fast, fueled by sheer, chaotic violence. Seren had witnessed 1,000 wolves shift. It was meant to be a fluid, natural grace. This was an abhorrent, agonizing mutation. "Ren, stay back!" Seren shrieked, but the child had already bolted upright, her mismatched eyes blown wide with terror. The monstrous shift consumed him entirely. Calder's human body shattered and rapidly reformed, leaving a gargantuan, nightmarish black wolf crouched in his place. But the beast was fundamentally wrong. Its limbs jerked in spastic, uncoordinated spasms. Its eyes rolled back wildly, totally unseeing. It looked like a tortured demon violently trapped inside its own skull. "No!" Ren shrieked, scrambling to her feet in blind panic. "No! No! No! This is exactly what happened to Mama." Seren's blood froze in her veins. "What?" "Before the bad wolves attacked," Ren sobbed hysterically. "One of them did this. He changed wrong. He was screaming in pain. And then," she slammed her tiny hands over her ears, "and then they all attacked." The colossal black wolf snarled demonically, pacing in a frantic, tight circle, its massive claws violently gouging deep trenches into the frozen earth. And then, echoing through the pitch-black forest, Seren heard it, howling. A massive pack of rogue wolves, rapidly closing in on their position. Calder was drowning in a sea of pure madness. The unnatural shift had ambushed him without warning, a catastrophic tidal wave of agonizing sensation that instantly obliterated 20 years of ironclad mental discipline. His inner wolf was rabid, frantically clawing at the inside of his skull like a trapped, panicked beast. This was not a natural shift. It was artificial. It was poison. Even as his mind violently fragmented, he recognized this nightmare. He had suffered these horrific episodes before brief, violent flares of mental instability that his mother had relentlessly assured him were a curse of his father's corrupted bloodline, a fatal flaw in his genetics, a permanent brokenness that could never be cured, only managed with daily tonics. But this was 1,000 times deadlier. Through the blinding haze of madness, he caught desperate flashes. Seren's face, pale with sheer terror, the orphaned child screaming, the terrifying, orchestrated howling of an enemy pack moving in for the kill. Ambush. He fought violently to warn them, trying to force human speech through a monstrous throat. But all he could vomit was a guttural, terrifying roar of agony. Suddenly, impossibly tiny hands clamped onto his monstrous, snapping muzzle. Ren, the child, had fearlessly crossed the clearing. She stood toe-to-toe with the gigantic, rabid beast, her tiny face locked in fierce concentration, her mismatched eyes burning with an intensity that sliced straight through the agonizing fog in his brain. "Mama taught me how to fix this," she commanded with absolute authority. "When the bad sickness comes, you have to breathe." She forcefully pressed her tiny forehead directly against his massive, lethal snout. Her scent completely overwhelmed his senses, young, impossibly clean, and violently threaded with the scent of Seren's wildflowers. "Breathe," Ren ordered him. In and out, like the ocean tide. Calder couldn't comprehend the magic. He couldn't fathom how this fragile little girl's touch could suddenly penetrate the absolute madness when his iron will had failed. But miraculously, the violent chaos in his skull began to recede. The rabid beast stopped thrashing. The frantic, explosive energy rapidly bled out of his monstrous limbs, leaving him hollowed out and completely paralyzed by exhaustion. "That is much better," Ren whispered, gently stroking his terrifying muzzle. "Mama always swore the sickness wasn't real. She said a bad person put it inside you, like a poisonous splinter in your brain. A poisonous splinter." The devastating words ricocheted through Calder's shattered mind as the horrific transformation violently reversed itself. He collapsed into the frozen dirt, completely naked and human, violently gasping for oxygen. "Calder." Seren threw herself to her knees beside him, her hands frantically gripping his shoulders. "Calder, look at me. Can you hear me?" The howling. His voice sounded like crushed glass. "The enemy pack. How close are they?" They stopped. Seren's face was a mask of grim realization. The exact second Ren touched you and broke the madness, the howling ceased. They were circling us. Now they are completely gone. Calder's jaw locked in pure, murderous realization. Watchers. Nerissa's elite death squad. They've been tracking me since I abandoned the keep, waiting for the poison to trigger so I would lose my mind and they could slaughter us. He stared up at the little girl with absolute awe. Whatever miracle you just performed, it broke the trigger before her assassins could strike. Ren nodded with extreme solemnity. Mama taught me. She said it was a matter of life and death. Calder hauled himself up, his eyes locked onto the child who had retreated safely to Seren's side. What exactly did your mother tell you, Ren? He asked, his voice trembling with the weight of the impending truth. About this sickness? About someone planting it inside my mind? Ren hesitated, glancing nervously at Seren, who gave her a fiercely encouraging nod. Mama was a master healer, Ren said in a hushed, reverent voice. She knew everything about herbs, about dark poisons. She said evil wolves use wicked medicine to rot other wolves' brains, to force them to do terrible things they would never normally do. Poison. The horrific word dropped into Calder's reality, like a nuclear bomb. She said she found the bad poison once, Ren whispered, her eyes wide with remembered fear. Inside a giant wolf she was trying to save, a wolf from the stone castle. She sucked the poison out of his blood to save his life. But she said whoever put the poison there would be incredibly angry if they ever found out. Calder's brain violently connected the bloody dots. 3 years ago, Maren had dragged him from the carnage. She had spent 3 agonizing days purifying his blood while he writhed in delirious fever. What if she hadn't just been healing battle wounds? What if she had aggressively purged a synthetic toxin from his veins? A neurotoxin that had been deliberately, systematically fed to him for decades. And what if the monster who had been poisoning him had discovered that the Ashford healer had cured him? The psychotic episodes, Seren breathed, horrified, following his exact train of thought. How long have you suffered from them? Since I was a boy, Calder whispered, sounding completely hollow. My mother swore it was a genetic curse, a rot in our bloodline. She fed me daily tonics to keep the madness suppressed. His mother had perished when he was 16. He had never once dared to question her motives. Why would he? She was trying to save him, or so he believed. But now, what if Nerissa had manipulated his mother too? Or what if his mother had blindly trusted the exact same monster he had? Your mother? Seren's face contorted in absolute horror. Calder, who specifically brewed those daily tonics? The answer violently erupted in Calder's throat like battery acid. Nerissa. Nerissa, who had been his mother's most devoted, intimate advisor. Nerissa, who had entrenched herself in their family for decades. Nerissa, who was always instantly there, holding a calming draft, the exact second an episode mysteriously triggered. Nerissa, who had relentlessly prodded, poked, and manipulated him last night until he spewed those vile words for Seren to overhear. No, the denial ripped out of him instinctively, desperately. She has been fiercely loyal for my entire life. She deliberately orchestrated for me to hear your words. Seren fiercely cut him off, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. She staged that entire conversation. She ensured I would be standing outside that door at the exact, devastating second. You cannot prove that. Can I not? Seren grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You just admitted someone powerful wanted Maren permanently silenced. Maren, the brilliant healer who identified the neurotoxin. Maren, who could have easily warned me, or any other Ashford wolf, about what she had found in the Alpha's blood. The horrific puzzle violently snapped together with sickening precision. Nerissa had been chemically lobotomizing him. The rabid episodes, the crushing mental instability, the deeply ingrained belief that he was a fundamentally broken monster, all of it completely fabricated, engineered to keep him perpetually dependent, isolated, and incredibly easy to puppet. And when Maren had accidentally purged the poison and threatened to expose the treason, Nerissa had dispatched a death squad to butcher her. The Raiders, Calder breathed, a lethal, icy calm finally settling over him. They were never rogue wolves. No, Seren whispered, her eyes burning with fury. They were Valdris assassins, following Nerissa's orders. Ren let out a pathetic whimper. When Calder looked down, the child was sobbing. The lady with the scary, sharp face, Ren cried, terrified. She came to our hidden village right before the bad wolves attacked. She cornered Mama alone. Mama was so terrified afterward. She forced me to memorize the secret path to the stone castle. She swore that if the bad wolves came, I had to hunt down the wolf with the gold eyes. Her little voice completely shattered. She knew. Mama knew they were coming to murder her. Calder's chest violently caved in. Seren had known she was marked for death. She had desperately prepared her little girl, propelling her toward the single, powerful alpha who owed her a life debt. And Calder had spectacularly failed her. He had let the mother be slaughtered and left the child to rot in the woods. "This is not your fault." Seren's fierce voice sliced through his spiraling panic. "You were totally blind. You were being chemically poisoned, brainwashed, controlled. I should have realized." "How?" Seren yelled. "You were brainwashed from childhood to believe the madness was your fault. You had zero reason to suspect treason." Calder stared down at his massive hands. They were eerily, perfectly steady. The violent tremors had completely evaporated. He felt a terrifying, crystalline clarity he hadn't experienced in decades, as if a suffocating, toxic fog had finally been forcefully ripped from his brain. Ren's miraculous touch had shattered the trigger. Whatever healing Seren had begun 3 years ago, her orphaned daughter had just permanently finished. "We march back immediately," Calder ordered, his voice echoing with absolute lethal authority. "Now, before that treasonous bitch realizes her ambush failed." "Is that wise?" Seren gripped his arm. "If she controls an entire death squad, if I do not march through those gates at dawn, she will instantly know the poison failed. She will vanish, and we will never, ever get justice for Seren." He looked down at Ren. "Or for any of us." The tiny orphan met the Alpha's furious gaze without a flinch. "Will you kill the lady with the sharp face?" Ren asked, her voice dead serious. Calder dropped to his knees before her, bowing his head exactly as he had once bowed to another desperate soul. "I will completely destroy her," he swore a blood oath. "I promise you." Ren scrutinized his face for an eternity. Then she gave a firm, fierce nod. "Mama always said promises are a matter of life and death," she whispered. "She said some wolves honor them, and some betray them." She reached out, placing her filthy little palm against his cheek. "I think you are the kind of wolf who honors them." Calder swallowed a massive, jagged lump in his throat. He had failed Seren. He had completely shattered Seren. He had wasted his entire existence believing he was a cursed monster, when in reality, he had been systematically mutilated and forged into a brainless weapon by the very woman he trusted most. But the monster was dead, and he was going to rip Nerissa's empire down, stone by bloody stone, until there was absolutely nothing left but ash. "We march at dawn," he snarled. "And when we breach the gates of Valdris, we end this nightmare permanently." They breached the gates of Valder's Keep, precisely as the bloody sun crested the eastern peaks. Seren had braced herself for absolute chaos. Guards swarming, frantic interrogations, desperate demands for the Alpha. Instead, they were met with a horrific, suffocating silence. The massive courtyard was totally deserted. The heavy iron gates had been left wide open. Not a single sentry challenged them. The colossal fortress felt utterly abandoned, gutted from the inside out, radiating a wrongness that made Seren's stomach violently heave. "A coup," Calder hissed, every massive muscle in his body coiling for a slaughter. Ren plastered herself against Seren's leg, her tiny fists strangling the fabric of Seren's cloak. "I hate this place," the child whimpered. "Stay glued to me," Seren commanded, her own heart hammering against her ribs. "Do not leave my side for a single second." They crept through the cavernous, echoing corridors, Calder taking the vanguard, his lethal wolf senses violently expanded. The keep wasn't empty. Seren quickly realized. She could hear the terrifying, muffled scuffling of boots, the hushed whispers behind locked doors. The entire household had been forced into hiding, holding their collective breath in sheer terror. They finally burst into the great hall. It was a scene of absolute carnage. Bren, the loyal captain of the guard, was forced onto his knees in the dead center of the blood-stained floor, his hands brutally bound with iron chains. Thick blood poured from a massive gash above his eye. Surrounding him was an execution squad, but these weren't Calder's men. They wore unmarked armor, their eyes dead, flat, and completely devoid of loyalty. And standing triumphantly upon the Alpha's elevated dais, practically vibrating with megalomania, was Nerissa. "Ah!" Her silken, venomous voice sliced across the vast stone hall like a poisoned blade. "You actually crawled back. I had sincerely hoped you would run off and die in the woods. It would have made this transition so much cleaner." Calder stopped dead at the entrance, his massive frame deliberately shielding Seren and Ren from her line of sight. "What the hell have you done?" "Exactly what I should have done decades ago." Nerissa descended the dais with the arrogant swagger of a queen. "Your pathetic father was weak, disgustingly sentimental. He was blind to what this territory truly required to conquer the world. But I wasn't. I built you, Calder. Every violent episode, every moment of paralyzing madness, every agonizing second you doubted your own mind, I was there, reminding you that you were a broken, pathetic monster who couldn't wipe his own ass without my guidance." "The daily tonics," Calder roared, his voice echoing like thunder. "You were chemically poisoning me, lobotomizing me, controlling you?" Nerissa shrieked with a psychotic smile. "There is a massive difference. The neurotoxin kept you unstable, desperate, totally convinced that if I ever left your side, you would devolve into a rabid beast." She let out a manic laugh. "It was sheer genius. You never once questioned the medicine. You never once realized the episodes only triggered exactly when I needed to put you back on your leash." Behind Seren, Ren let out a terrified gasp. Seren instantly clamped a hand over the child's mouth, shoving her behind her skirts. "And Marin?" Calder bellowed, his fangs practically bursting from his gums. "The Ashford healer who saved my life?" Nerissa rolled her eyes, her face twisting in profound annoyance. "A pathetic inconvenience. The meddling bitch recognized the chemical markers in your bloodstream. If she had run her mouth to the council," she waved her hand as if swatting a fly, "she had to be permanently exterminated. You sent assassins to butcher a mother." Seren's furious scream tore through the hall, echoing off the stone. "You slaughtered an innocent healer and left her starving child to rot in the woods." Nerissa's psychotic gaze finally snapped to Seren, and a look of pure, unadulterated hatred mutated her features. The little southern whore finally speaks. How dramatic. "I had deeply hoped you would just vanish and die, girl. It would have made my ascension inevitable." "Your ascension?" Seren spat. "Absolutely!" Nerissa screamed, no longer bothering to hide her treachery. With the pathetic treaty bride gone, Calder would have been utterly shattered. The pack would have begged for stability. The choice was obvious: a disgraced foreign whore who fled in the night, versus the brilliant, devoted advisor who had masterminded the territory for decades. They would have crowned me Luna. The horrific magnitude of the betrayal hit Seren like a physical blow. Everything. The poison, the assassinations, the psychological torture. You did it all to steal my crown. I took what was rightfully mine. Nerissa's composure completely detonated into raw hysteria. I bled for this territory. I sacrificed my entire existence. And what was my reward? A conquered, pathetic little princess who didn't even want the alpha. She spat vehemently on the floor. You never deserved him. You are nothing. And mass murder makes you deserving? Calder took a massive, lethal step forward, his voice dropping to a demonic, vibrating growl. Drugging your alpha, slaughtering innocent women, committing high treason against every sacred oath you ever swore. I did what was necessary for ultimate power. Nerissa shrieked, throwing her hand in the air. Immediately, the 8 heavily armed assassins abandoned Bren and violently, completely surrounded Calder. Exactly as I am doing right now. These mercenaries are not Valdris wolves, Calder snarled. No. They are exclusively mine. I bought their loyalty years ago, and you were too busy playing warlord and crying over your fake madness to ever notice who actually controlled your army. Seren's heart hammered a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. She desperately calculated the odds. 8 elite, heavily armed assassins, all perfectly positioned to butcher them the second they moved. They were completely boxed in. Call them off, Calder demanded, radiating a terrifying, icy calm. The woman and the child have zero part in this coup. Let them walk out the gates, and you can try to take my head. My quarrel is with every single rat that stands in my path. Nerissa's deranged gaze locked onto little Ren, who was trembling behind Seren, including the healer's bastard brat. She knows entirely too much. Her meddling mother taught her how to purge the poison. She smiled a terrifying, reptilian smile. And as for that stupid servant girl outside your study, I bought her too. I needed your pathetic little treaty bride to hear exactly what I wanted her to hear, so she would run away and die. It was insultingly easy. Nerissa slowly raised her hand, preparing to drop it and order the massacre. It ends here, she shrieked. Slaughter them all. But before her hand could drop, little Ren stepped completely out into the open. You murdered my mama. The child's voice rang through the cavernous hall crystal clear, completely fearless, and sharp as a razor. Every single assassin froze in shock. Even Nerissa paused, completely derailed by the sheer audacity of the tiny girl. Ren marched directly into the dead space between the execution squad and the usurper. She was impossibly small, dressed in filthy rags, yet she radiated an aura of terrifying power. Her mismatched eyes locked onto Nerissa with an intensity that made the very air in the room drop 10 degrees. Mama warned me about you, Ren stated, her voice unnervingly steady despite the tears pouring down her cheeks. The lady with the scary, sharp face. She said you were deeply, deeply sick. Not a fake sickness like the Alpha had. A real, evil sickness. The kind of rot that eats you alive from the inside out. Shut your mouth, you filthy brat, Nerissa hissed. Mama said monsters like you are just terrified cowards. Ren took another fearless step forward. That is why you murder innocent people. Because you are so pathetic and small inside, you have to butcher everyone else just to feel tall. The absolute truth of the child's words completely obliterated the last shred of Nerissa's sanity. Enough! Nerissa let out a demonic screech. She violently lunged off the dais, drawing a wickedly curved dagger, and closed her hand like a vice around Ren's tiny arm. No! Seren screamed, launching herself forward. Calder exploded into motion. But it was Bren who triggered the chaos. Despite his brutal injuries and iron bindings, the captain threw his entire body weight sideways, violently tackling the closest assassin. The killing formation instantly shattered. Absolute bloody chaos erupted. Seren scrambled desperately toward Ren, but Nerissa was already violently dragging the screaming child backward up the dais, slamming the razor-sharp blade directly against Ren's throat. Stop! Nerissa shrieked, her face a terrifying mask of absolute psychosis. Take one more step, and I will slit her bastard throat. The entire hall froze in horror. But miraculously, Ren didn't struggle. She didn't cry out. She simply stared up at the deranged monster holding the knife and spoke with eerie, prophetic calm. You are going to die, right now. Nerissa let out a manic, breathless laugh. Am I? Yes. Ren smiled, a tragic, fiercely certain smile. Mama promised me before she died. She said the lady with the sharp face would eventually come to kill me. And she swore on her life that when you did, the giant wolf with the gold eyes would keep his promise. Your mother was a delusional, dead whore. Nerissa spat, her grip tightening on the hilt. No, Ren whispered. She was never wrong about anything. Nerissa screamed in fury and violently jerked the blade across the child's neck. But Calder had already vanished. It defied the laws of physics. 1 millisecond he was a man, the next, a colossal, nightmarish black wolf launched itself across the massive hall with terrifying velocity, its massive jaws snapping open, aimed directly for Nerissa's jugular. The dagger slashed downward. A geyser of blood sprayed across the stone. But it wasn't Ren's blood. Calder had thrown his massive body directly between the blade and the child. The vicious dagger sank deep into his chest, ripping a horrific, gaping trench from his collarbone down through his ribs. The sheer momentum carried them both. He crashed to the floor, the violent trauma instantly forcing him back into his human form. He collapsed on the cold stone, bleeding out in massive, pulsing waves. No! Seren's raw, agonizing scream tore her throat apart. She threw herself across the blood-slicked stone, completely ignoring the chaotic, brutal melee erupting around her as Bren and the loyal guards furiously slaughtered Nerissa's assassins. Nerissa was screaming in agony somewhere in the background, but Seren couldn't hear it. She violently slammed her hands against Calder's gaping chest wound, frantically trying to dam the catastrophic hemorrhage. Thick, hot blood instantly saturated her clothes. Calder's face was shockingly pale, his life violently rapidly draining away. His unfocused, darkening eyes desperately searched for hers. Ren. He choked out, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Is she? She is unharmed." Seren sobbed hysterically, pressing all her weight into the wound. "You saved her. You kept your promise. But you cannot leave me. Do you hear me? You have to stay." Calder's massive, trembling, blood-soaked hand weakly lifted from the floor and cupped her face. "Seren, do not say goodbye." Tears poured down her face, violently mixing with his blood. "Do not you dare say goodbye to me. You do not get to die on me." His thumb weakly brushed across her cheekbone, leaving a smeared trail of crimson. "I'm just so sorry. For all of it. For every beautiful thing I should have said to you." "Then say it right now," Seren screamed, desperately willing her own life force into his shattered chest. "Say it, and stay alive long enough to mean it." His eyelids fluttered, heavily dragging downward. "I love you," he breathed. It was barely a whisper, a final, absolute truth. And then, Alpha Calder's eyes rolled back. His massive chest stopped heaving, and he went completely still. The ensuing 3 days were a suffocating, agonizing purgatory. Seren refused to leave Calder's bedside for a single second. She choked down whatever food Ren physically forced into her hands. She slept upright in a hard wooden chair, jolting violently awake at every microscopic fluctuation in his shallow breathing. She gripped his massive, unresponsive hand and frantically talked to him, pouring her soul out because the crushing silence felt entirely too much like death. The frantic healers offered only grim, cautious optimism. The poisoned blade had missed his heart by a mere fraction of an inch. The catastrophic blood loss should have killed a mortal man 10 times over. But his inner wolf was ferociously battling to knit the shredded tissue back together. Yet, he remained comatose. On the second brutal day, Bren limped into the chamber. His arm was strapped tightly in a sling, his face a bruised, battered mess from the slaughter in the hall. "Nerissa is chained in the deepest cells," he reported, his voice dropping to a grim, satisfied rumble. "The surviving traitors have been locked in irons. The council is in absolute uproar. But they will hold the line until the Alpha recovers." "When he recovers?" Seren immediately snapped, her eyes burning with fierce denial. Bren swallowed hard, bowing his head. "When?" Miraculously, little Ren was the only soul in the keep who harbored absolutely no fear. Every single evening, she sat cross-legged at the foot of Calder's bed, her mismatched eyes watching him with a serene, unshakable certainty. She shed no tears. She displayed no anxiety. She possessed the profound, terrifying patience of a child who had already learned that sometimes waiting was the only weapon you had left. "He is going to wake up," she confidently declared to a weeping Seren on the 3rd night. "Mama swore that some giant wolves are just entirely too stubborn to die. I think he is definitely one of those." Seren let out a wet, desperate half-laugh. "You think so? How can you be so certain?" "Because he promised," Ren stated, as if it were an indisputable law of physics. "He swore a blood oath to keep me safe. He hasn't finished keeping that promise yet, so the universe won't let him die." Seren stared at this extraordinary, unbreakable little girl, a child who had had her entire world violently ripped away, yet still fiercely believed in the sacred power of a promise. "Your mother raised a magnificent warrior," Seren whispered, wiping her tears. A microscopic flicker of grief crossed Ren's face, instantly contained. "She raised me to survive. I think they are the exact same thing." On the dawn of the 4th agonizing day, Seren was jolted awake by the sensation of calloused fingers weakly tangling in her hair. She snapped her head up. Calder's dark eyes were open. They were exhausted, shadowed with pain, but miraculously, unequivocally, lucid. His hand was buried in her hair where she had collapsed across the mattress, and he was staring at her with such profound, devastating adoration that she felt the breath leave her lungs. "You stayed," he rasped. His voice was completely wrecked, a terrible, gravelly ruin. "Of course I stayed!" Seren violently burst into tears, throwing herself across his massive chest. "You reckless, stubborn, absolutely impossible man." He weakly pulled her face down and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was clumsy, desperate, and tasted heavily of salt and tears, the most profound, violently honest exchange that had ever passed between them. When they finally broke apart, Seren was trembling uncontrollably, and Calder's massive hands were cupping her face as if she were the most sacred relic on earth. "I meant every single word," he swore, his voice thick with raw devotion. What I whispered before I fell. I love you, Seren. I should have screamed it at you on the day we met. I should have proven it every single day. Yes, you absolutely should have, Seren sobbed, pressing her forehead fiercely against his. But you are going to spend the rest of your life making it up to me. You are going to tell me every single day until I am completely, utterly sick of hearing it. The corner of his bruised mouth finally twitched upward into a genuine, beautiful smile. That sounds like a direct threat. It is a promise. Suddenly, a tiny, joyous squeak erupted from the foot of the bed. They both snapped their heads up to see Ren standing there, her mismatched eyes shining with absolute, unfiltered joy. You woke up, the child cheered. I did, Calder grunted, painfully extending his massive arm toward her. Come here, little warrior. Ren practically scrambled up the mattress, miraculously avoiding his heavy bandages, and fiercely wedged herself against his uninjured side. Calder wrapped his giant arms securely around her. I kept my promise to you, he whispered to the child. I know you did. Ren buried her face in his shoulder. I never doubted you for a second. Seren watched her massive, lethal mate completely envelop the tiny, orphaned girl, and felt the last fractured, bleeding pieces of her own soul permanently snap back into place. The agonizing brokenness that had plagued her for years was finally beautifully healed. She cannot return to her village, Seren said quietly, her eyes locking with Calder's. There is absolutely nothing left for her in those ashes. I know. Calder looked down at Ren, then back up to Seren, his dark eyes blazing with absolute certainty. If you will permit it, I want her to stay here, with us. Ren instantly stopped breathing. Not as a political ward, Calder clarified fiercely. Not as the payment of a blood debt, as our flesh and blood. His voice cracked heavily. As our true daughter, if she will have us. Ren slowly pushed herself back, her mismatched eyes frantically searching the Alpha's face for any trace of a lie. Then, she turned her desperate gaze to Seren. Both of you? She whispered, her voice trembling violently. You would both be my mama and papa? Seren leaned forward, gently wiping a tear from the child's cheek. Only if you want us to be. For a long, terrifying moment, Ren was paralyzed. Her tiny face was an unreadable mask of ancient, suppressed grief. Then, she gave a fierce, definitive nod. Mama said families are not always the people whose blood you share, Ren choked out, tears finally spilling over. She said sometimes you have to find them in the dark, and when you do, you hold on with everything you have. She threw her arms around Calder's neck. I want to hold on forever. Calder crushed her tightly to his chest, and Seren threw her arms around them both. For the very first time since she had fled that icy fortress in the dead of night, Seren finally, truly knew what it felt like to be home. 3 months later, the horrors of the past were nothing but ashes. Seren found her family sprawled lazily in the lush grass of the South Gardens, bathed in the golden afternoon sun beneath the ancient oak that had guarded Valdres for centuries. Calder was flat on his back, his massive chest rising and falling peacefully, his dark eyes closed in absolute contentment. Little Ren was draped completely across his stomach, her tiny hands furiously weaving a massive, colorful flower crown. She was aggressively lecturing him, unleashing a relentless torrent of highly critical observations and demanding he take her entirely seriously. And then the stupid guard claimed that river trolls were totally real. But I completely shut him down because everyone with a brain knows river trolls only inhabit the western swamps. And he had the audacity to say I made that up. But I didn't. Mama taught me that. And Mama never lied about anything, except for that one story about the three-legged fox, which she totally admitted was a massive exaggeration. Breathe, little warrior, Calder rumbled, his deep voice thick with lazy amusement. The words will still exist in the air after you take a single breath. I breathe perfectly fine. Ren violently jammed a bright red flower into the crown. You are just ridiculously slow at listening. I am deeply wounded by that accusation. I only just recovered from a mortal stab wound, you know. The healers said you were perfectly fine a month ago. You were just being a massive baby. Seren slapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a bark of laughter. In a mere 90 days, Ren had miraculously transformed from a traumatized, hypervigilant orphan into a brilliantly feral, fiercely confident child who wasn't the least bit terrified to aggressively bully the most lethal alpha in the realm. She had firmly planted her roots. They all had. Seren stepped out from the stone archway. Instantly, Calder's eyes snapped open, his predatory instincts locking onto her with unerring precision. But the look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated worship. His slow, devastating smile was entirely, exclusively for her. "Seren!" Ren shrieked, scrambling off Calder's chest and proudly thrusting the massive, chaotic flower crown into the air. "Look at this masterpiece! I made it specifically for the ceremony tonight." Seren crouched down, inspecting the chaotic tangle of weeds and petals with the utmost solemnity. "It is an absolute triumph, truly the finest crown ever constructed." "Obviously," Ren declared, totally devoid of modesty. "I am incredibly gifted." Calder snorted violently from the grass. "So remarkably humble, too. Humility is for weak people who haven't earned their confidence." Ren jammed the crown onto her own head, striking a ridiculously dramatic pose. "And I have earned it." Seren exchanged a hilarious, completely exasperated look with Calder, who was visibly biting his lip to keep from howling with laughter. "She absolutely gets that terrifying arrogance from you," Seren accused him. "Lies. That is 100% her mother's terrifying energy," Calder shot back. He paused, his smile softening into something profound and breathtakingly real. "Both of her mothers, I think." The bonding ceremony that evening was intimately small. No treacherous council members, no political leeches, just their fiercely loyal household and a handful of devoted witnesses. Bryn stood proudly at Calder's right hand, his scarred face twisted into a gruff scowl to hide the fact that he was violently fighting back tears. Ren sat dead center in the front row, her chaotic flower crown slipping wildly over one ear, her mismatched eyes locked onto the altar with ferocious, unwavering intensity. The vows were incredibly simple. No grandiose political declarations, no treaties, just two battered, healing souls swearing a blood oath to choose each other every single day until the end of time. "I despised this marriage," Seren whispered fiercely, her hands completely swallowed by Calder's massive grip. "I thought I was a sacrificial lamb, a piece of meat traded to appease a monster. I thought I had been violently stripped of every choice I ever had." Calder's thumbs traced desperate, loving circles over her knuckles. But somewhere between running into the dark and fighting the poison and learning how to breathe again, Seren looked up, her eyes blazing with absolute, undeniable devotion. "I completely stopped being a treaty bride. I became yours. Not because the council demanded it, because I fiercely, desperately wanted to be." "Seren." Calder's voice completely shattered. "I do not deserve you." "You do," she fiercely cut him off. "You have violently earned me every single day since that forest. You earned me by fighting the madness, by protecting our daughter, and by being the exact wolf who keeps his sacred promises." From the front row, Ren let out a massive, highly theatrical sigh of satisfaction. "I literally told you guys," she loudly stage whispered to absolutely no one. "I told you he was the good kind of wolf." Calder threw his head back and laughed. The sound was deafening, rich, and completely beautifully unburdened. Seren knew, with absolute certainty, that she could live 1,000 lifetimes and never once grow tired of that sound. "I love you," Calder vowed, his dark eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. "I will fiercely love you tomorrow, and the next day, and every single day, until the universe burns out, and there are absolutely no days left." Seren smiled, rising on her toes. "That sounds exactly like a promise." "It is," he murmured, crushing his lips against hers. "And I always keep my promises." As he pulled her into a devastating, breathtaking kiss, Ren screamed in triumph. Bren suspiciously violently cleared his throat, furiously swiping at his eyes. And somewhere far in the distance, a wild, free wolf howled a song of absolute victory at the rising moon. Seren had fled the icy gates of Valdres with absolutely nothing. She had returned with the entire world,